and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
May we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Corman?
Here.
Mr. Taylor?
Here.
Mr. Zwicker?
Here.
Ms. Breyer? Here. Mr. Prince?
Here.
Mr. Person?
Here.
Ms. Palmer? Here. Roll call, Mr. Mayor, all present.
Thanks, Bonnie. First item on the agenda is a proclamation.
Proclamation, Ready in Renton Month. Whereas September has been designated by the President of the United States of America and the Governor of the State of Washington as National Preparedness Month and coincides with the City of Renton's Ready in Renton Emergency Preparedness Campaign. And whereas the City of Renton has experienced natural and human-caused disasters in the past, and scientific evidence indicates the city and the region remain vulnerable to disasters in the future. And whereas investing in the preparedness of ourselves, our families, our businesses, and our communities can reduce fatalities and economic devastation in our region and in our nation. And whereas the basic steps of emergency preparedness are the same for everyone: make a plan, build a kit, and help each other. And whereas staying informed is a vital part of responding appropriately to emergencies, and all Renton citizens are encouraged to participate in citizen preparedness activities and to review the Ready in Renton campaign materials at rentonwa.gov. And whereas Ready in Renton creates an important opportunity for every resident of the City of Renton to prepare their homes, businesses, and community for any type of emergency. And whereas this year the city seeks to reach out to our culturally diverse communities to encourage participation and preparedness, now therefore I, Dennis Law, Mayor of the City of Renton, do hereby proclaim the month of September 2013 to be Ready in Renton Month in the City of Renton. In witness whereof, I've hereunto set my hand and caused the seal of the City of Renton to be affixed this 19th day of August 2013, signed Dennis Law, Mayor of the City of Renton.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Mr. Taylor.
I move that this proclamation be adopted as read.
Second?
It's been moved by Mr. Taylor, seconded by Ms. Breyer, that this proclamation be adopted as read. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. It's my pleasure to present this to Mindy Matson, who is the city's Emergency Management Coordinator.
So as you know, my name is Mindy Matson. I'm the Emergency Management Coordinator for the city. And on behalf of my Department, Fire and Emergency Services, and our Emergency Management Division, I want to thank you for this proclamation and for taking the time to spotlight our very important Ready in Renton campaign. This year we are focusing on reaching out to our diverse communities, and we are really, really excited about the possibilities that holds. We do want all of our residents to understand that the helping each other is one of the most important components of disaster preparedness, that we have to have neighbors looking out for neighbors, whether it's a small windstorm or a catastrophic disaster like an earthquake. We're all going to be in it together, and we're all going to need to reach out to each other and provide help. More information will be ready on Ready in Renton in September. It's not on the website yet, but at rentonwa.gov. And for folks who follow social media, it's on both Twitter and Facebook, and we go by Renton EM, all one word. Have any questions for me?
Any questions from council?
Thank you
very
again
much,
very
Mindy.
much.
Thanks for your great work. Okay, we're going to move on to 3 public meetings, and I can see I've got Angie and Raquel here. No, Raquel, you're just support.
Good evening. My name is Angie Mathias. I'm a planner here with the City of Renton in the Department of Community and Economic Development. Mr. Mayor, members of council, tonight I'm here to talk about 3 proposed annexations. There's a lot of slides that are redundant, so I'll spend a little bit of time on them on this first one so that we've got those covered, and then I won't spend very much time on them on the second and third one, but I'll cover the parts that are different for those others. So this first one is the Alpine Nursery annexation as it's proposed. And as you can see, we're pretty early on in this annexation process. The petitioner, and that's the case with all three of them that we're presenting tonight, a petitioner has submitted a petition to the city clerk and said, hey, we'd like to propose this annexation, and now we're at this step where we're meeting with the council, and it's up to you guys to see how much further we go in this process. And you can see there's a whole lot of steps along the way that would have to happen for any of these to actually come into the city. So state law requires this meeting that we're here tonight doing with the proponents. You guys get to decide whether you want to accept, reject, or geographically modify the boundary of these annexations as they're proposed. If you accept them, then you also authorize that circulation of that 60% petition. So they go around and get signatures of folks that represent 60% of the assessed value of that annexation area. And you also get to decide whether or not to require simultaneous adoption of zoning. So this annexation, Alpine Nursery, is to the eastern portion of the city. You can see a little bit blown up over here. The boundary isn't quite as legible as it could be, but there's a large parcel here with some subdivisions to the north of it. So it is within our potential annexation area. It's located again at the eastern portion. It's in our East Plateau Community Planning Area, about 17 acres in size. The current uses are single family. There's a nursery there, that Alpine Nursery as it's named, and then just vacant land. The boundaries to the north uses Southeast 8th if that were to be a fully extended street. That's not an improved roadway at this point in time. The east uses 161st Avenue Southeast. The south is a parcel line, and then the west just uses 160th Avenue Southeast. And here's an aerial shot of that with the boundary roughly running. Here's the north, the west, south, and then the eastern portion of it there. The topography in the area, there is some slight slope up here in the northern portion, but that area is already built out. So that's not something that would really come into effect if, in the case of this annexation, if future development were to happen. There are no streams or wetlands in proximity to this area at all, so that's not something to be considered. Public services, it's currently served by Fire District 25. Renton serves that under contract and would just serve it directly if the area were to annex. It's served by Water District 90, and then Renton Sewer, those things would not change. And then it's in the Issaquah School District. That also is not something that would change if the area were to annex. We always look at King County and what they have it designated in both their comprehensive plan as well as what they have it zoned with. So in King County, it's designated in their comp plan as 4 to 12 dwelling units per acre, urban residential medium. And so they could zone it any of those different zones, 4 through 12. They've designated it as R4, allowing 4 dwelling units per gross acre. In Renton, we already have pre-zoned it. It's designated with our residential low density designation, and it's pre-zoned for R4 in Renton. So if the area does come in, we did that a long time ago, and that area would become effective upon annexation. This isn't always the case, but it is for a lot of the East Plateau area. We always look at our comprehensive plan to see if there's relevant policies, and there are for annexations. Objective LUI calls for the support of annexation of areas that are within our PAA, as we said that it was, and can be efficiently provided with infrastructure and city services, are urban separators, or have environmental constraints. So this area does use our city it can be provided efficiently with services, so that one is applicable. LU 41 calls for the promotion of annexation of areas with a residential population who already use our services or impact our infrastructure, and that also is the situation with this annexation with folks using roads and probably parks and those types of things. So then we look at the Boundary Review Board objectives. As part of the process, if this annexation proceeds, we would submit this to the Boundary Review Board for them to look at. And so ahead of time, we like to look at their objectives and see if there's any red flags or anything that they might object to or have issue with. So some of the relevant ones in this case are that whether it uses physical boundaries, including but not limited to bodies of water, highways, and land contours. This uses parcel lines and roadways, so that one is good. To create or preserve logical service areas, those are previously agreed to, so that's not applicable. Prevention of irregular boundaries, this is a pretty regular boundary, pretty much just a rectangle. And then annexation of an area to a city that's urban, and Renton is an urban city. We always do a fiscal analysis. The current conditions in the area are that there's 32 dwellings with an estimated 90 residents. Looking at the buildable lands capacity, if some of that vacant land were to develop in the future over the next 10 years, it's estimated that there would be an additional 25 dwelling units and that there would be an additional 70 residents in those dwelling units. And then we assume that costs increase at roughly 3.3% annually and revenue at 2.5% annually. That's limited to sales tax, utility tax, and our franchise fee. So for this area, the way that it currently is existing with the existing dwelling units only, the revenues are about $32,000 and the costs are about $30,000. Year 10, with those escalations in revenues and costs, as well as if the area were to fully build out with those new dwelling units, revenues would be at about $65,000 and costs at about $58,000. For our capital and enterprise funds, revenues existing are about $13,600 and costs are about $7,800. And at year 10 would be about $2,600 in or $26,000 in revenue and about $13,000 in costs. So we always then circulate these when they're submitted to the clerk and ask different city departments, give them the opportunity to make comment, ask them if this represents a logical extension of their services, if they have any concerns, those sorts of things. All departments indicated that this indeed represents a logical extension of their services. In conclusion, the best interests and general welfare of the city are served by this annexation. It does represent a logical extension of our services. It's consistent with our annexation policies, and it's also consistent with the Boundary Review Board criteria. So the recommendation of the administration is that you do authorize the circulation of that 60% petition, but then also specify that they accept our comprehensive plan, land use designation, and zoning.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Mr. Corman.
I just have one question. It's a lovely nursery. I've been patronizing it for decades.
Okay.
And is there anything about this annexation that would hinder their ability to continue to operate as a nursery in our R4 zone?
Not at all. They would, even if, I would have to check to see if it's allowed or not allowed in our R4 zone, but even if it were not, they would be grandfathered in. They can continue that use as long as they continue that use.
Okay.
If they abandoned that use over time, that would be something that if it was not conforming, that they may have to do something differently with.
Okay.
But
Any other
Thanks.
questions from council?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Mr. Person.
the difference between the city's R4 designation and the county's R4 designation is that ours designation is on net,
that's correct.
so that actually there's fewer houses would be built under the city's R4 than it would be in the county's, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
In Renton, we require that they take out rights of ways or critical areas and those sorts of things before they use what's left to build on.
Okay, any other questions? We don't have anybody signed up to testify. Do we have any correspondence?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Mr. Zwicker.
move that, is this one big public hearing, or is it a public
We
hearing
got
for
3
each?
public meetings.
Yeah, so I move that the public meeting be closed.
Second.
Been moved by Mr. Zwicker, seconded by Mr. Prince, that this public meeting be closed. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Mr. Zwicker.
Again, taking them one at a time, I move that the council authorize the circulation of a 60% direct petition to annex, specifying that they accept the city's comprehensive plan, land use designation, and zoning.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Zwicker, seconded by Mr. Prince, that council authorize 60% direct petition to annex. Any additional discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it.
Thank you. So the next petition that we received is the Colacurcio annexation. Again, won't go over that, we've covered that one. Same purpose with this meeting, to decide whether to accept, reject, or geographically modify, and then if so, to authorize circulation of the 60% petition and specify whether to accept zoning or not. So this one is actually in a different portion of our city. It's on the western portion up near Lake Washington, up by the Renton Municipal Airport. It is within our potential annexation area, again at the western portion. This one's in our city center community planning area, about 4.1 acres in size. The current uses are mobile homes and vacant land. The boundaries to the north is just a parcel line. The east does in fact use Lake Washington, and then the south is another parcel line. and the west uses Rainier Avenue South, to give you an idea of exactly where we are. So here's an aerial shot of it, and you can see that mobile home park, a little bit of the airport down there to the southeast of that, and then some of that open land to the north on that northern parcel. So there is just a very small portion of topography in here, but not necessarily anything that would be regulated. It does abut Lake Washington, so it falls within our shoreline jurisdiction. So that would be something that would come into play for these folks if they were to develop in the city. It's also near the Cedar River and an unnamed Class 4 stream. So it's currently served by Skyway Fire, Fire District number 20. Renton Fire would serve this directly and would respond to calls for fire and emergency services. Utilities, it's served by Skyway Water and Sewer, so there's not a separate sewer provider up there. And it is within the Renton School District, and that would not change upon annexation, and neither would the Skyway Water and Sewer provider. In King County, these two parcels are designated with urban residential high in their comprehensive plan designation, and that allows 12 or more dwelling units per acre, and they've chosen to designate this with residential 48 dwellings per acre in King County. In Renton, we've designated this area with commercial office residential, and it has not been pre-zoned. We only have one choice. Sometimes we have a variety of zoning designations that we could use. The only one that this designation is implemented with is the COR zone. It's an intense zone that would allow commercial, office, or residential, sort of self-explanatory. But it has not been pre-zoned, so if it were to move forward, the annexation would simultaneously do zoning public meetings and public hearings. The first of those would occur with that 60% public hearing. We would do that at the same time, and then a second one would come at the tail end of it. So looking at our comprehensive plan policies, the first one, supporting annexation of county areas within our PAA that can be efficiently provided with infrastructure and city services or urban separators or have environmental constraints. There's a little bit of concern with this one. It is within our PAA. However, there's concern by the administration that there's city services would not necessarily be efficient. The boundary, basically, they would have to travel both like police, fire, and then road maintenance would have to travel. They'd go along Rainier Avenue, be in the city, then they go out into the county for a while, and then serve this weird parcel up there. And that's not necessarily an efficient provision of services. It does meet policy LU 41, promoting annexation of areas with a population who use our services and our infrastructure. So that criteria is met. Looking at boundary review board policies, it does use bodies of water and parcel lines and roadways, so that objective is met. It is of an area that is unincorporated area coming into an urban city, as we talked about earlier. In terms of creation and preservation of logical service areas, the ones like water and sewer and school district are all previously agreed to, so those are unchanged and not applicable. But the road maintenance and police that I just spoke about is not really accessible without traveling outside the city, so we're not sure what the boundary review board might think of that. Another one that the boundary review board may look at again would be the prevention of abnormally irregular boundaries. In some ways this is touching only at the corners. We don't know if this is something that would be a concern to them. The Municipal Research and Services Center says that there's some court decisions that have talked about touching at corners. We don't know exactly what corners mean, and it would be up to the boundary review board to really review this and scrutinize this if we proceeded with it as is. So looking at the fiscal analysis, there's currently 17 dwellings in those mobile homes and sort of an apartment unit for the manager, the site manager. We estimate there's about 36 residents living there. Future conditions would be to have an additional 39 dwelling units potentially built out again over 10 years with an estimated 101 residents. That's because it would be a multifamily type scenario is what we would assume. And because it's got that commercial office component, we assume that there's capacity for about 66,000 square feet of commercial or office use there with approximately 265 employees. So this is different than a lot of other annexations that we oftentimes look at. Again, the costs and revenues increases that we've looked at before. So as it exists, revenues would be about $15,000, we estimate, with costs at about $7,600. And by year 10, the revenues would be about $74,000 with costs at about $32,000. And then that's the operating fund. To the capital and enterprise funds, revenues are about $2,300 with costs at about $400. And by year 10, $22,000 with costs at about $11,500. So the city staff reviewed this annexation. It does represent a logical extension of their services. However, there is a concern about that boundary and the provision of services. So there is a request to amend the boundary of this annexation as it was proposed by the proponent to basically close up those gaps. So there's the closing of this hole that's over here by closing it up there and bringing that to this point, as well as bringing it down to include these 3 parcels to the south, and then including Rainier Avenue, so that then the service provision would be very clear and the boundaries would make a lot of sense for the city. Provided the boundary is amended, the best interest and general welfare of the city are served by this annexation. It does indeed represent a logical extension of the services that we provide. It is consistent with our policies with that amended boundary, as well as with Boundary Review Board criteria. The administration recommends that council go ahead and amend that annexation boundary and then authorize circulation of the 60% direct petition and specifying that property owners accept our comp plan land use designations as well as our zoning.
Thank you, Angie. Any questions?
Mr. Mayor, yeah.
Yes, Ms. Blair.
So the addition for the annexation is coming from the city?
Correct.
And the proponents are aware that that's the recommendation?
Yes, and they're here tonight.
Okay.
Yeah, and
So
I think plan on speaking.
There's not an issue?
No, they're not. It's not their preference.
All right, thank you.
Correct.
Any other questions from council?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Mr. Zwicker.
Yeah, Angie, tell me more about the manufactured home park that's currently there. It's been there for years. We're going to inherit it.
Yep.
And as a city thing, what considerations have been taken into that? And the manufactured homes have a whole set of laws that govern them and their
Correct.
existence and that type of thing. So I'm a little concerned that maybe we haven't researched that sufficiently, and not asking you to give me the answer because
Sure.
we're here in the public hearing. So I just saying I have pause with that also in this one, and I'm not sure where other options are here tonight. If it could be referred for more discussion or something, and so you may want to go over those also, because right now I'm kind of at a loss on where I'd want to vote with this one personally. Thanks.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Mr. Person.
Who are the owners of the other properties? I know one's the Lake Shore Land.
Correct. So the parcel, this abutting parcel, this large one is Lakeshore Landing, the retirement community. This one here, this smaller parcel is, I believe, condominiums or apartments. I'm not sure, because then the next one to the south is condominiums or apartments. And so apartments would be owned by one owner, as opposed to condominiums that are individually owned with depending on the number of units. I think that the condominiums have roughly 20 units or so in them, and the apartment is a little bit of a larger apartment complex.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes. Ms. Blair.
Have those property owners been notified of this or contacted of the possibility of joining?
So Lakeshore Landing, the proponent of this annexation has been in contact numerous times with Lakeshore Landing in particular, and has tried to work with them in asking them to join, and so has talked about this a number of times with them, and I think she's prepared to talk about the conversations that she's had with Lakeshore Landing. The owner of the apartment building she's also spoken with, and had conversations with that person about their interest in being added to this annexation.
Do they have a Renton address or Seattle address?
Sounds like Seattle. I don't know that answer to
Is it?
that.
Okay, so they would change their address to Renton, the zip code?
So the long term, that over time, that is supposed to be what happens, but ultimately that's up to the post office. And we, in fact, have areas that annexed as part of the Benson Hill annexation that were designated as Kent and have not yet changed. And so it's really up to the Postal Service. They are in Renton, but as their address still says Kent, and the Postal Service sometimes takes a long time to make those changes.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, we have a number of people who have signed up to testify. When I call your name, please come to the podium, give your name and city of residence for the record, and you have 5 minutes. We have a timer right here next to the city clerk. First is Neeson Harrell.
How are you doing?
Hi.
Thank you for letting me speak. I am Nissan Harrell. I work for Aero Living, which is the company that owns and operates the Lakeshore, which is the building adjacent to the property wanting to be annexed. I'm just going to read a statement. The Lakeshore is in firm opposition to the city's acceptance of the 10% notice of intent petition and associated zoning to commercial, office, and residential under the Renton Municipal Code. As initially proposed, the annexation would create an illogical service area requiring travel through King County in order to provide city services. We are also opposed to the addition of the Lakeshore parcel to the annexation boundary. Lakeshore's 158-unit facility was developed and is compatible with the existing surrounding single-family and multifamily properties, condominiums, and apartments, allowable under existing King County R48 zoning. Annexing any of the parcels with COR zoning is incompatible with the characteristics of the existing neighborhood. The Lakeshore facility provides housing to an aged population. The adjacent properties proposed for annexation, including a mobile home park, apartment building, and condominium building. Changing the zoning to intensive commercial buildings, offices, hotels, and even convention centers would have drastically negative effects on the quality of life of our elderly residents who seek out housing such as ours in the West Hills that can provide safe, secure, and peaceful housing within the broader community of urban services, even if those services are more costly within the county. West Hill citizens resoundingly rejected annexation of this same area not even a year ago. Notably, annexation of the West Hills population of over 10,000 people would have made Renton eligible for offsetting sales tax under RCW 82.14.415 to ameliorate the fiscal impacts to Renton of having to provide services to a newly annexed area. The current annexation in either configuration would not come close to the $10,000 resident threshold to trigger the financial assistance provided under RCW 82.14.415. Accepting the 10% notice of intent petition, either as proposed or as revised, is a first incremental step into annexing the West Hills, but without the financial support of offsetting sales tax, an even less attractive proposal than rejected by the voters last November. The loss of offsetting sales tax cannot be dismissed as insignificant. The public services that Renton would have to provide to this area going forward are likely more costly than shown. The annexation fiscal analysis attached to the August 5th memorandum to council assumes that the future use of the annexation properties will be housing units. However, the property is already zoned for dense housing. A change to COR is only necessary to enable intensive offices, hotels, and convention centers. It is unreasonable to base the fiscal analysis on the addition of only 39 housing units over 10 years, when the benefit of the annexation is to take advantage of newly allowed uses under COR zoning. The fiscal analysis underestimates the range of potential impacts by assuming the addition of just a few housing units per year. For illustration, hotels and convention centers generate traffic, liquor sales, increased policing, business licensing, and inspections. The fiscal analysis done for this annexation does not provide any analysis of these uses and their impacts, all of which would be enabled by COR zoning. Until an analysis is performed on the various types of development that would be allowed under COR zoning designation and a thorough, inclusive analysis of both the potential revenues and costs of providing services to the new range of uses, the notice of intent should be rejected. Were the petition for annexation withdrawn and resubmitted with a change in zoning to be applied upon annexation to a high-density housing equivalent to King County's R48, the Lakeshore would more positively consider the inclusion of the annexation boundary. Otherwise, we urge the city to reject 10% notice of intent petition in either configuration.
Thank you. Next is Catherine Laird.
Sir, may I have a copy of what you wrote?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Mr. Corman.
Thank you very much.
Sir, I forgot your name. maybe we can come back. I had some questions for him, but I...
Go ahead.
Gotta be at the
Okay.
podium.
I'll try to answer as best I can.
Okay, yeah, and I don't want to put you on the spot.
No, it's okay.
So I'm curious, I have some questions for my own staff here about for the city staff about the density comparison of the COR zone and the R48 zone. But in general, I think of the COR zone as allowing a mix of retail and, as you mentioned, basically some quasi-public spaces. And we've used it elsewhere where we have shoreline. And one of the values of doing that, instead of just going with traditional, 48 unit per acre apartment buildings, is that the public will get shut out of an apartment complex that's 48 units per acre sitting on the lakeshore. But if it's got retail and restaurants, the public might be able to approach the lakeshore. So I'm curious whether that's really would the residents of your complex really be happier to not be able to get any access to the shoreline or have a coffee house there that's next to the water? I mean, is that really something they'd prefer, do you think?
Well, I think you're right. If you're talking about an apartment building with some retail on the bottom or some, I think, and like we said, I think we'd be proponents of a nice residential building or, whatever would be developed there. It's when you put COR on it, though, it could be a hotel, it could be an industrial office. There's just things that we wouldn't want there that under that zoning allow for. So you're right, in that scenario, but we can't control that once it's zoned.
Okay, good. Thanks, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I think that's it, thanks. Catherine Laird, sorry.
Yeah, sorry about that. Make you come on.
Good evening. Thank you for your time. It's Catherine Laird, L-A-I-R-D. I'm here representing the applicant. I'm from Seattle, Washington. The Carlacucci, I represent the estate of William Carlacuccio. The owner of the property passed away last year, and so I guess I'm here to assure you there are no plans right now to do anything with the property. The estate approached us and asked us what would be the best approach for this property, and we thought being within the city of Renton really was the highest and best use and future entitlement process for this property. So that's why we submitted the application for the 10% or the 10% petition. As Angie mentioned, I did contact both the Lakeshore property, and I contacted them a couple months ago, and they were at the time kind of indifferent, just said we don't want to support it, but they didn't show strong opposition. I also contacted the owner of the mobile home park to the north, which is called Bryn Mawr, and that same owner, the owner of the Bryn Mawr, also owns the apartment building to the south that's now being proposed in the geographical modification. That owner, Steve Harr, said he wasn't interested, in part because he has partners, and he said his partners just didn't support it. So that's all I can really represent. I did reach out to Steve again last week whenever I saw Angie's geographical modification, and didn't hear back from him, but did write to him and say, can you tell me whether you'd support it for the apartment building where you didn't support it for the trailer park. As you know, this is part of the West Hill annexation area. The comprehensive plan for both the county and the city recognized this as a potential annexation area, and it's because this really should be served by urban services. The Growth Management Act was passed over 30 years ago and asked cities to identify these areas that should be appropriately served by urban services, and we think that this area, of course, should be included, and we're the first property owner, I think, that wants to come into from the West Hills area. This is a waterfront property that I assume will be developed in the future. There are no development plans right now, but it's really more appropriately served by Renton, and the citizens of Renton under the COR zoning could have access potentially to the waterfront as well. There have been 41 petitions for annexation approved in the last 10 years by the city of Renton. If you were to look at that patchwork of petitions, they are primarily by petition and not by vote, and they're mostly on the east side of the city. I suspect if you looked at all of those 41 annexation areas, there have been times where an annexation was approved and a county road was used for accessing that annexation area. I know that the modification that's being proposed now by the staff argues that because you have to travel over county roads, there's this disconnect in services. I would submit to you it's a 1,019 lineal feet of Rainier Avenue South from the city's boundary up to this property. I don't know that traveling less than a quarter of a mile is really that impactful to the services that are provided by the city. So we would, of course, ask that the petition be approved as originally proposed and without the geographic modifications. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have with regard to the petition, but at this point, we believe that the petition is, one, consistent with your comp plan, it's consistent with your land use policies, in particular the policy 41 that talks about areas that should be served by urban services whenever they're developed, and this property meets that, in my opinion. When and if it's developed in the future, it will have enough density, whether it's under the R48 of the county or the CRO zoning of the city, that really should be recognized for the urban density that it is and provided with the services that certainly the city of Renton could provide. So we would request respectfully that the petition be approved and moved forward to the 60% process without the geographic modification proposed by the staff. And I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, thank you very much. Next is Peggy Jordan.
I'm Peggy Jordan. Thank you for taking the time to listen. I think that I misunderstood the purpose of this in that I thought I would get to ask questions rather than speak about something. I live in the trailer park, and I appreciate your concern about the manufactured homes. I've lived there for 15 years, I think, which is hard to imagine, but I've lived there 15 years. It is a wonderful place to live. The late Mr. Colacurcio, quite a character himself. It was kind of fun and novel and unusual to have the owner of a property be such a person. And we who live in the trailer park were really happy to be there and are still happy to be there. I realize that there's nothing that we can do to stop any kind of huge building. It's Mr. Colacurcio died, and his heirs certainly are entitled to do whatever they want with that property. I guess I just want to kind of defend it and say that there are river otters there, there are eagles there, there are lots and lots of turtles that live there, there are all kinds of wonderful critters that make that area their home, as well as we two-legged people who make that area our home. And so I guess I speak for a lot of us who live there because we don't have any idea what a timeline means or what an annexation means to those of us who live there. And so those were my questions. How long does it take? What does it mean? What does it mean for us, those of us who live there? And I don't know who can answer that.
Ms. Jordan, there's 3 staff members right behind you there, and any one of them would be able to answer a lot of those questions that you have.
Okay, great.
I think that what you're going to find out, the action being proposed tonight is just for the annexation itself, not the development of the property, because nothing's being proposed at this point in time. So, in fact, it can happen under King County, or it can happen under Renton.
Okay.
So if the property owner chooses to develop it, they'll be able to develop it.
Okay.
So, but they can certainly answer questions that you might have.
All right, that would be great. Thank you for your time.
You bet, thank you. Next is Mark. I'm sorry?
Sometime, it's beautiful.
Oh, okay, thanks. Next is Mark Johnston.
Hi, my name is Mark Johnston. I live in unincorporated King County, and I'm here to, I guess, oppose this 10% notice of intent. I have something I'd like to put on the single-page reader, if I can, for your information. basically, this is a snapshot of the document that was available online about this annexation. And what I did was I overlaid the same scale mile marker or feet marker there. It goes from 0 to 400 feet. And as you can see, the actual boundary that this proposed annexation actually coincides with the current city of Renton boundary is far less than 200 feet. So I'd like to call the council's attention to Objective LUK and Policy LU44 that goes with it. Objective LUK talks about the city boundaries that facilitate efficient delivery of emergency and public services. And in particular, Policy LU44 talks about the types of characteristics that are good for annexation, and which I believe that this proposal violates to some extent. Number one, the annexation of territory that is adjacent to the existing city limits in general. The more land adjacent to the city, the more favorable the annexation. And I guess I'd argue that less than 200 feet of actual coincident boundary is rather unfavorable in that regard. Number two, inclusion of unincorporated islands and peninsulas are to be encouraged, and actually this proposal creates a peninsula just to the south. So it's kind of antithetical to the policy in that regard. Use of natural or man-made boundaries that are readily identifiable in the field are encouraged, and in this case, most of the boundary are property lines and not natural boundaries or roadways. Inclusion or exclusion of an entire neighborhood rather than dividing portions of the neighborhood between city and county jurisdictions. And I think that's clear that this proposal does that. And the final one is inclusion of natural corridors, either as green belts or urban separators between the city and adjacent jurisdictions, and there really isn't any logical separation to the north or to the south that's kind of this natural, those natural features as suggested by the city's own policy. In addition, as a resident of West Hill myself, I'm personally concerned on behalf of my community that this one-off annexation could prefigure a sort of slippery slope where high-value properties are absorbed into Renton, but proportionally lower-value properties are left to remain in the unincorporated West Hill potential annexation area. And as you know, many residents in the West Hill hope to eventually annex to Renton. That may be a surprise to the council. I wouldn't prefer to see a series of high-value annexations have the effect of delaying the eventual annexation of the entire potential annexation area of West Hill. And as you know, this property is the southern tip of very high-value properties that extend all along the shoreline. So, thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. Next is Matthew Kimball.
Good evening, Matthew Kimball. I'm a Renton resident. I actually have to apologize because I had intended to want to make a comment on the L. Martin's proposal.
Okay, that would be the next one if you want.
Yes. So if that would be all right?
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Madam Clerk, do you have any correspondence?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, what's the wish of the council?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Ms. Breyer.
I wonder if I could have one of the staff, he makes the comment about the 200 feet that's adjacent to the water, and you might talk about how our boundaries go into the water area. I mean, isn't that part of the issue there? With the shoreline?
Yeah, good question.
So if this annexation were to proceed, without the inclusion of those 3 additional parcels. In fact, the City of Renton, this technically, as this comes up, is City of Renton property as it is, and so it just these are the parcels that are owned by the proponent, and so that's what they proposed. If we weren't going to add these 3 parcels, then we would want to add this little chunk. It's actually a portion of this larger parcel that's down here, being the Renton Airport. Why it wasn't included originally, we don't know. It goes back so far that nobody here is aware of.
So it really doesn't have anything to do with the shoreline itself and...
No.
Okay.
It actually really should have been already, this should be abutting.
All right.
For that entirety.
Okay, thank you. What's the wish of the council? Yes, Mr.
Move the
Zwicker.
public hearing be closed.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Zwicker, second by Mr. Prince, that this public meeting be closed. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Mr.
I guess my concern on this annexation is the zoning. Because it seems to me that the Lakeshore people wouldn't be opposed to some kind of apartments with a coffee shop, you know, which would be a nice amenity for this area. And I don't know the rules well enough, and I'm not trying to negotiate anything, but I would like to see if we could hold off on this and see if there is some kind of agreement that could be reached, if that's what it is. Because this piece of property is going to develop, whether it's in the city or in the county, and I personally would rather have some control over it from the city's standpoint. But I think what the Lakeshore said made sense, and they did not seem opposed to some kind of a development that made sense, and the fact that it could give access to the water to the public makes a lot of sense to me too. So I don't know if we can accomplish that, or do we have to vote it down and then let the proponent come back?
Let's see if Angie wants to tackle that question.
I'm going to let Chip tackle that one, to be honest, because I'm not sure.
Good job, Angie.
It's sort of splitting the difference. So, tonight, we do need to take action. Technically, there's a 60-day window in which we need to accept, reject, or geographically modify, and we are hitting that 60-day window tonight. And so we do need to take some sort of action. I don't know if we could table the conversation or just outright reject it and then allow them to return. I don't know if the proponent would even want to go through that, and that's sort of where I want Chip to talk about how that might work.
Thank you, Angie, and thank you for the question, Councilmember Person. I'm looking for Zanetta here because I heard the same thing from the testimony, and I would love to be able to have the opportunity to sit down with the applicant as well as the property owners who would be affected by this and see if there is some other alternative zoning that would be acceptable to all parties that we could advance. My question for Zanetta, if she's hearing me, well, there she is, is if action tonight could include describing a meeting to occur between the applicant and the representatives of the different properties with the idea of coming back with an alternative recommendation that could then move forward. And I don't know, Zanetta, if that would suffice as an action by the council on the petition that's in front of them.
That's not an action. Mr. Mayor?
1 second, let them debate this.
Well, I'm not be able to fine-tune the question to what happens if we vote it down tonight. What's the ramification of that?
Well, if you vote it down tonight, it stops.
But they can start over?
Yes.
Right. I mean, can we get a little more detail on exactly what happens?
Yeah, sure.
Then I should get to Mike, I think.
So essentially, as proposed, then this annexation goes away. It just is done. But there's nothing precluding the proponent from bringing back essentially the same proposal and just bringing it back as a 10% petition again, at the same area, and we could just revisit this again at a later date.
Did that answer your question?
What about cost?
There is no filing fee anymore for annexation.
Well, it still then leaves the question that I think Chip and Zanetta are talking about then is what's the possibility? I'm not seeing why we'd leave it open. I think they got the message where we'd want to go with this, that they kind of need to work together with the rest of the group. I don't see the benefit of having it open, unless there's a benefit of having it open and spending more time.
Yeah, I don't think that we can leave it open. I think you have to reject, accept, or geographically modify tonight. I think those are the only three choices, really. If you would like, I think, to have them continue talking about it as they proposed it, then you would want to reject it. If you want to approve it with that modified boundary, I don't know where that would necessarily leave us.
Does the rejection require a motion, or is it just lack of action?
It requires action.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Mr.
I was thinking this through as well. So the staff really only supports it if we add the additional properties, but I can kind of do the math in my head, and I think that the 60% petition will get rejected. So I guess I don't see any reason to go forward if we're going to add those properties, because the fully developed apartment building and the senior living home are going to be big, sway, I think.
I think especially without Lakeshore Landing, that would be
Mr. Mayor?
pretty high.
Yes, Mr. Covington.
The clerk and I are just talking. We don't have one of the resource books here right with us, but our recollection is under the law, you've met the public meeting requirement within 60 days of the petition being forwarded to you. It's not critical that you make a decision tonight. So if the council wanted to wait until next week, you could to either accept or reject the petition. You don't have to make it the same.
But it'll be 3 weeks.
That may just further or muddy the waters. If the council feels that you've got enough information tonight, we certainly would encourage you to go ahead and make it.
Can Zanetta come to a mic, or?
That would be good.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Mr. Person.
I guess if I'm just thinking is if we could hold, if we don't have to take any action for the next 3 weeks, we could have all these questions answered by the time we come back on September.
I wanted to confirm.
We'll take a 5-minute recess. We'll double check to confirm.
Can we move on to the next public hearing while I figure it out?
Yeah, you said, do we move to table it and
Later
come back?
meeting?
Is that how is that?
Well, I think you can close the public meeting, and then we can come back for your action.
We've closed the public meeting.
Okay, so I think we can just wait to take action.
Okay, and there's no motion.
Yeah, we don't have a pending motion. Let's just do the next public
Okay,
hearing.
Angie, we're going to go ahead and move on with the next annexation request.
Thank you. Okay, so the third one for this evening is the Meritons annexation. We're at the exact same place. The petitioners submitted a 10% petition, and we're tonight meeting with the petitioner. So we're having that state-required public meeting. This one is at the northeastern portion of our city, just off of Sunset Boulevard, or Renton-Issaquah Road, as it's also known as. So it's within our potential annexation area. It's located in our East Plateau Community Planning Area, is about 4.2 acres in size. Its current uses are single-family and vacant land. The boundaries to the north, it uses Northeast 16th Street. To the east, it uses a parcel line. To the south, it uses that Southeast Renton-Issaquah Road. And to the west is just a parcel line. So here's an aerial shot of it. You can see primarily it's just open land. So the topography in the area, there's really none directly within the parcel. There is some topography along Southeast Renton-Issaquah Road, but that really wouldn't come into play for this site in particular. In the streams and wetlands, there is a Class 4 stream approximately 600 feet to the east of this site, and then Class 4 Honey Creek is approximately 450 feet to the south. So it's currently served by Fire District 25. As with our first annexation as it was proposed, Renton Fire will serve that directly. They're currently serving that under contract. Water District 90 serves, and Renton Sewer serves this area for utilities. That would not change, and it's within the Renton School District. That would not change. As with our first one, this is designated in King County in their comprehensive plan as urban residential medium, allowing between 4 and 12 dwelling units per acre, and they've zoned it with R4, allowing 4 dwelling units per acre. This one for Renton is designated as residential low density but has not been pre-zoned. So in our residential low density designation, there's actually 3 zones that are allowed. Resource conservation, which allows 1 dwelling unit for 10 acres. R1, which allows 1 dwelling unit per 1 acre, and then R4 allowing 4 dwelling units per acre. We have not pre-zoned this area at all. If it does proceed, then the zoning would happen as part of the annexation process, again with that first public hearing occurring if the 60% petition is submitted. So looking at those comprehensive plan policies, this annexation is of an area that's in our PAA and can be efficiently provided with services. It's not an urban separator and doesn't directly have environmental constraint, but it can be efficiently provided with the road connections as they are. And it is of an area that is a residential population that's already using our city services. Boundary Review Board criteria, it does indeed use physical boundaries, uses parcel lines and roadways. The service areas are unchanged, so it doesn't create or preserve any different, any service areas. The boundary is perfectly regular, so there's not an irregular boundary in this case, and it's an unincorporated area to an urban city. So the current conditions, there's 1 dwelling unit in this annexation area with an estimated 3 residents. Future conditions would be that there would be capacity again, if it was to develop under that R4 zoning potentially and to be fully developed over 10 years, that would allow for 13 additional dwelling units with an estimated additional 36 residents. Again, our assumptions are that the cost would increase at about 3.3% annually and revenue at about 2.5% annually. So to the operating fund as existing revenues, about $1,600 in revenues and costs about $1,700. By year 10, if it were to build out with changes, it doesn't have to, but if it were to build out at that full capacity, it would be about $25,000 in revenue and $18,000 in costs. In capital and enterprise funds, the revenues currently are about $138 with costs at about $25. And year 10 would be $5,400 and about $3,000 in costs. So again, city staff reviewed the annexation as proposed. All departments indicated that it does indeed represent a logical extension of their services and did not express any concerns with it as it is proposed. The best interests in general welfare of the city are served by this annexation. It represents a logical extension of our services. It's consistent with our annexation policies and Boundary Review Board criteria. And the administration recommends that we authorize the circulation of a 60% petition, but that it specify that they accept city comprehensive plan land use designations and our zoning, or our land use designation and zoning. That's all that I have.
Thank you, Angie. Any questions from council? Okay, we've got a couple people who have signed up to testify. When I call your name, please come to the podium, give your name and city of residence for the record, and you have 5 minutes. We have a timer by the clerk. Evan Hamilton.
I wish I was as eloquent as the representative from Lakeshore and had written comments with all the legal, but we only got word of this about 10 days ago by mail. But I appreciate the council taking open comments. My name is Evan Hamilton. I've lived 37 years in the same place, and if they could bring up the aerial view, it is at 14434 Southeast Renton Issaquah Road, which is a state highway as well, State Road 900. And I would respectfully oppose this, even though I've been friends with the Martins, even before she was named that, before her marriage, since about 1975. Obviously, there are traffic concerns, and I suppose I would not be in opposition to this if it was going to be zoned and you could give me something in writing that it was going to be R1 rather than R4, really high density. It's such a beautiful piece of property. I would like to know if someone could give me for the record, or one of the representatives, that are on the planning council about this mitigation of what the 10% is, because as you can see, I think, my question is that the 1% is, or the, I mean, excuse, the 10% is one person, and therefore, since there's only one owner, the 60% of people affected is also one person. So if you guys could ask questions pointedly to find out the facts about that and give me something in writing, I would appreciate that, respectfully. But I firmly oppose it also because it's a small island. It's not worth the council's time. It's not as complicated as the Lakeshore situation, but the city is not served. That is not an urban city area. It is actually a rural way of life. And I hope that you are sympathetic. I'm hoping I can persuade a few of you to agree that there are a rural way of life, much the way there are many people in Enumclaw that come to the King County Council and appeal to them about the rural way of life that it has and was been. And that there are still horses on that property, which is wonderful. I would respectfully, for the record, want that the notice of intent be rejected. I'm not sure how 4.2 acres of this unincorporated King County can be of value to you, but it certainly would be a lot of, if there was to be construction, and I would love to meet whoever this developer is that is proposing this by the seller, buyer kind of thing, because there's be a lot of noise and what's the right word, chaos, because they are not served conveniently, as was in this presentation, by State Road 900. In fact, what will happen is if they are annexed, my fear is the rest of us who are in those little areas right below it, I'm the one parcel, just one step right over the fence from this property that is affected by this. They do not have access to that road, but have to go out the backside to the north. So therefore, if the rest of us are forced to be annexed in, there's about, and also for the public record, we did have a vote on this a couple of years ago, which the post office has caused confusion. That's why I kind of laugh when you mention the post office and their way of doing things. The address is still confused because of what happened. There were about 18 of us in this unincorporated King County group, and the vote was about 16-2 in favor of not being annexed. So the vote was overwhelmingly not to be annexed, and that is in the public record. I have letters from the city of Renton that were basically, the letters were an apology letter coming from the mayor's office because of the confusion that arose because the post office assumed we were annexed when everybody else was. So yes, we are an island, but I would respectfully ask you to, if you're able to table it or push it back, or to say we would move forward, but it would be R1. It would be a single dwelling, because it looks like she gave you 3 options for development. That would be wonderful. So thank you for your time, and I'm sorry I didn't have eloquent lawyer legal speak, because we just didn't have enough time to talk to all the neighbors, but we had about 10 days from the written notice. But I would appreciate if something perhaps from the city clerk could be in writing to explain to us what that 60% is and what that 10% is, so for us who don't know the legal speech. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Next is James O'Brien.
Good evening, Mayor, council members, and staff. I was born and raised in Renton, and I am the closest neighbor to the Alpine Nursery up in the Briarwood South area. I'm on 161st Avenue Southeast. Lived there for 43 years, and been kind of nice having a nursery next door. We go over and buy the plants, and the view is beautiful. And I tell you, there's been a lot of growth up in that area. So I have just a couple questions. One is, I'd like to know what the catalyst is that starts one of these annexations. Is it from the city? Is it from a builder, a property owner?
It's from the property owners.
I see. There's been some rumors, and I haven't talked to the people next door, but that they sold the business and the land.
Mr. O'Brien, you're interested in the Alpine annexation?
Yeah, this is
Okay,
the Alpine Nursery.
Yeah, this is, the council's already taken action on that one.
I'm sorry.
We're on another annexation now, so.
Sure. Well, that's okay. I didn't fill the form out.
And you could still ask your questions at the general audience comment, which is still going to come up probably in about 15 minutes, if you'd like.
The other thing is when, if they come forward with a 60% petition, you'd have a chance to be able to testify at that time also.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Next is Matthew Kimball. Oh, yeah.
Good evening again, Matthew Kimball. I'm actually a resident in the Summerwind community, which is basically my house. I look out and I see the lovely property. I know the owner, Laura. She's a lovely lady. I'm just here tonight to just express a few concerns, and I appreciate the previous gentleman speaking. I'm not opposed to the annexation. I think it's a logical development. What I'm more concerned about is the development and the zoning of the land. The Summerwind community, I believe most of the properties are on somewhat of a quarter-acre type thing, and the adjacent community, which is Windsong, I think they've gone to more of the higher dwelling capacity, probably R4. I'm also concerned about how they develop the access roads. Currently, there is no direct access except for, if you were to go back to the slide, there's a cul-de-sac. And that is basically how you access that development. I believe on the backside they're doing additional development, so it's becoming much denser, more traffic. One of my concerns as a homeowner in that community is, I would say that the community is, I use the term transitional, in that you've had longer-term residents starting to move out and more younger-term residents coming in. There's a lot more children in the area, and so concerns about traffic and those types of things. So I believe just kind of learning how this process works. This is the initial, do you approve the annexation? Again, I'm not opposed to it. I believe I probably would want to attend the 60% hearing where you maybe talk more about development, but I would hopefully could put a note in about how it's zoned. I am concerned about being an R4 zoning just because of the density, and would hope that there could be some sort of an extension of the Summerwind community, which again is on larger acres, to perhaps an extension of that look and feel, and then the basically the access to that development. So thank you very much.
You bet, thank you. What's the wish of the council?
You want to check for correspondence?
She's been telling
Move we close the hearing.
It's been moved by Mr. Person, seconded by Ms. Palmer, that we close the public meeting. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. What's the wish of the council on this annexation?
I move that we authorize the circulation of the 60% direct petition to annex, specifying that property owners accept the city's comprehensive plan use designation and zoning.
Second. It's been moved by Mr. Person, seconded by Mr. Prince, that council authorize a 60% direct petition to annex.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Mr. Corman?
Just a clarification before we vote, is the specific zoning still in play? Is that what I'd understood, or is there a specific recommendation?
I'm sorry, I missed the first part of your question.
Oh, so it's an R4, it's a recommendation?
So it's R4 in King County currently, just to be very clear. It's not pre-zoned. So if this annexation proceeds, then the city would be zoning it simultaneously. So part of that, we would do a zoning public hearing at the 60% public hearing at the same time. And so we would consider zoning at that time. But for the purposes of the state requirements, you have to tell folks when they sign that 60% petition that they're going to have to accept our zoning, so that they're aware of that.
So the wording's still right. Okay.
So
Correct.
That'd be a good time then for Mr. Kimball to come back and talk about this.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any further questions or discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Angie. Now we're going back to the Carl Kircho annexation request. Did we have some information on that?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Zanetta Fontes from the City Attorney's Office. I've had an opportunity to review the legislation, RCW 35A 14120, and it does say that you have to have this meeting within 60 days, but the purpose of this meeting is to determine whether you will accept, reject, or geographically modify. That's the purpose of this meeting. So it is my opinion that you have to take action this evening. You either have to reject, accept, or geographically modify. And then I'll turn to staff to, as it relates to where you are in that sticky wicket, but.
Okay, thank you, Zanetta.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Mr. Zwicker.
I move that we reject the Carla Cicchillo 10% petition.
Second.
So moved by Mr. Zwicker, seconded by Mr. Prince, that council reject the Colacurcio annexation request. Any
Mr. Mayor?
further discussion?
Yeah, just to go ahead and explain my motion. I think with the irregular boundaries, the issues that come into play with the different property owners that are nearby that could be included in it, I think it's a back to the drawing board kind of thing. I think we kind of made our concerns known. I'm also very concerned about the manufactured home park and bringing that into the city at this point, especially when the ultimate goal may be to redevelop that entire property. So I'd like to learn more about that should that matter ever come forward again. But I don't see anything on its face, especially being in that area of town, that says this is a logical annexation for us. And I think the concerns that were raised were good ones. I'm not saying never bring it back. I'm not saying go back to the drawing board and take a look and see what you can do. But at this time, I can't move to advance it.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Mr. Person.
Well, I agree with not accepting the 10% now, but I think it would be important if it were to come back to have our views taken into account, because I think if it was developed right, it's going to be better for the city to have it in the city and have the whole thing. I agree with not having the gap on Rainier Avenue, but I wouldn't want to discourage the people from going forward and doing some talking. This is going to develop, whether it's in the county or it's in the city, and I would much rather have some control over its destiny than not, but not the way it's presented tonight. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. That takes care of our public meetings. Thank you very much, Angie, for all your work. Moving on to administrative report, Mr. Covington.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, several items for the community's and council's interest, and just as by way of reminders, we continue our neighborhood picnics this summer. Wednesday, the Talbot Hill Community Annual Neighborhood Picnic, which includes Valley View, Victoria Hills, Victoria Park, and Winspur, and Talbot Hill Neighborhood Associations will be held. That's August 21st, 5:30 p.m. at Thomas Teasdale Park, which is located at 601 South 23rd. And then the following night, the Honey Creek Ridge Homeowners Association will hold their annual picnic from 5:30 to 7:30 at their common area, which is located at Olympia Avenue Northeast. Residents are encouraged to bring their favorite side dish and attend their designated picnic to get to know their immediate and surrounding neighbors and meet some city representatives. The Fall Community Services What's Happening brochure will be ready for viewing online this Saturday, 24th. The brochure is also mailed to Renton residents and is available at our community center and our libraries. We want to announce that Monday, September 2nd is the last day for lifeguards at Kennydale Beach and Coulon Beach. So that tan that Councilwoman Palmer has been sporting all summer is going to slowly start to fade.
Oh, say it ain't so. I'm not ready.
And their second annual Pooch Plunge, which is scheduled for that following Saturday, September 7th at Henry Moses Aquatic Center. The 1-hour sessions are available from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m., 10 a.m. to 11 a.m., and 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Folks who are interested need to know advance registration is recommended since last year's sessions were sold out. That's all, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Next is audience comment. We have a couple of people signed up to address the council. When I call your name, come to the podium and please give your name and city of residence for the record, and you have 5 minutes. Beth Asher.
Hi,
Beth Asher, obviously, from Renton, and I wanted to talk about downtown again. I had come before and given my presentation on using Big Five as a catalyst for downtown revitalization, and then I thought, why not take a three-pronged approach to this thing? I have heard that Renton Technical College is looking to co-locate. They would like to be downtown. When we originally started to put up our veterans housing, or where Luther's Table is, when our church gave that property back to the bishopric so they would do this, that was one of the stakeholders that we had, Renton Voc-Tech. They lost their funding. They were unable to do that. They're still, I understand, looking for property downtown, so I'm thinking the lease sign is up again on the old City Hall. What better use could there be than to have classrooms right next to a library, school, library. And also, students walk about, they buy coffee, they buy food, they buy little things that aren't necessary because they're students. They would walk up and down, you know, third and second and, you know, inject a little bit of money back into that corridor. So there's two prongs to the approach. The third prong might be, and I don't know how this would work because I don't know how we, what the contract with the management company is. I didn't do a public information request for that yet. But we have the Piazza. So if we could keep the farmers market open year-round, because that really does draw people downtown, by maybe moving it into the Piazza on its designated day, you know, because the Piazza is dark and empty quite a bit. There's another draw. And there's another thing that would also get students to walk around and get people down there. So those three things may be taken together. Maybe they're incremental. But maybe if we could work on those three as a package, we could inject some life back into that downtown core and get then investors and other businesses looking at moving in there because they see a commitment, they see vitality, they see something going on down there. And again, I think the Arts and Culture District can be very, you know, instrumental in that because that also draws people from outside the area. Again, not going back to the same, you know, well with our picture and getting people not from Renton to come down here and, you know, inject some revenue because we can't always depend just on our own demographic. It's nice to have something that draws people from outside, and if we sponsor a couple of events a year and exhibitors are in the pavilion and we've got the farmers market going all year and etc., we've got a draw. So just an idea. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Council, since Beth brought up downtown, I should let you know that I've already had a meeting with most of our department heads or their deputies to discuss a comprehensive approach to dealing with our redevelopment efforts and desires in the downtown. Good. We're working on some particular initiatives right now that we'll come back to discuss in 2 weeks. We're looking at all the benefits, all of the targeted spots, the property that's available. We've had RTC leadership downtown to look at several spots. Old City Hall does not work for them, but they're still interested, and we're showing them some other potential options. Other developers are showing some interest in some of the other parcels downtown, and I'm going to convene a stakeholders meeting, property owners, business owners, and other downtown interests probably in the next few weeks, so we'll keep you informed on what's going on with that.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Mr. President.
Also, I think we were told at the last committee of the whole meeting that the property across the street from Luther's Table there on 2nd has been sold, and there's a development plan for that piece of property already.
Condominium that's going in on that corner.
Yeah, condominiums. 2nd and Morris.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I think that's a fantastic idea. I would also, if you haven't already decided, to urge you to include broad participation from the community also, so that they can weigh in terms of some of the interest they would have in patronizing whatever it is we're talking about doing down there.
Yeah,
I think Beth would be one of the people that I think might be good to talk to.
We've got a number of people identified from the downtown community, as well as people who participated in this city center plan. And so we'll keep you advised of what we're doing with that.
Very exciting. Good.
Next is Lynn Hanson, I believe. Lynn Hanson here. Okay. Moving on to the consent agenda, we have 11 items for council consideration. Are there any items a council member would like pulled for discussion?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Mr. Corman.
I move approval of the consent agenda as published.
Second. It's been moved by Mr. Taylor, moved by Mr. Corman, seconded by Mr. Taylor for council to approve the consent agenda. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Ms. Palmer.
Item K was something that was added on, and I just want to give a little clarification. Its Transportation Systems Division recommends approval of an agreement with the FAA for Grant 026 application to accept up to $150,000 for a wildlife hazard assessment. The reason this went council concur at the last minute was because we've just found out that the agreement needs to be submitted by September 1st, and we won't be back here by then. And what this is, $150,000 from the FAA, and we match it with $16,000. They do 90%. Will be professional assessment on the birds and wildlife that we have there. We all know we have a problem. The airport is continually hazing and doing different things to try to keep the birds away from the aircraft. But having a professional firm come in, we'll see if we're doing the right things, if there's something more we should be doing, and just make sure that everything is as it should. And it will have a plan at the end, a recommendation. So I just wanted to clarify that since it didn't go through committee.
Thanks. Next is unfinished business. Mr. Corman.
No unfinished business, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Mr. Taylor.
No old business, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Zwicker.
No unfinished business, Mr. Mayor.
Ms. Breyer.
Yes, the Finance Committee has 2 reports.
Finance Committee report, approval of claims and payroll vouchers. The Finance Committee approves for payment on August 19, 2013, claim vouchers 322-811 through 323-169, 2 wire transfers and 1 payroll run with benefit withholding payments totaling $5,176,645.45, and payroll vouchers include 818 direct deposits and 128 payroll checks totaling $1,713,473.76. This is signed by the 3 committee members.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Ms. Breyer.
Move that council concur with the Finance Committee report.
Second.
Been moved by Ms. Breyer, seconded by Mr. Person, that council concur with the Finance Committee report. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? You guys have it.
Finance Committee report, Jean Coulon Memorial Beach Park Log Boom Replacement Project. The Finance Committee recommends concurrence in the staff recommendation to approve the contract with Ballard Diving and Salvage in the amount of $221,267.07 to replace the timber log booms at Jean Coulon Memorial Beach Park. The committee further recommends that the mayor and city clerk be authorized to execute the contract. This is signed by the 3 committee members.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Ms. Breyer.
I move that council concur with the Finance Committee report.
Second.
Been moved by Ms. Breyer, seconded by Mr. Zwicker, that council concur with the Finance Committee report. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Next is Mr. Prince.
No unfinished business, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Person.
No unfinished business.
Ms. Palmer.
No unfinished business.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to resolutions and ordinances. We have 1 resolution and 1 ordinance for first reading.
The resolution regards the aquatic lands lease for Coulon Park. A resolution of the City of Renton, Washington, authorizing the mayor and city clerk to enter into an interlocal agreement with the Department of Natural Resources entitled Aquatic Lands Lease for Jean Coulon Memorial Beach Park.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Mr. Corman.
I move adoption of the resolution.
Second.
Been moved by Mr. Corman, second by Ms. Palmer. The council adopt this resolution. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it.
And the ordinance for first reading regards the Sunset Lane Northeast Street vacation. An ordinance of the City of Renton, Washington, vacating a portion of right-of-way on Sunset Lane Northeast from Northeast 10th Street to Harrington Avenue Northeast. This is the Renton Housing Authority street vacation.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Ms. Palmer.
I move the ordinance be placed on second and final reading at the next council meeting.
Second.
It's been moved by Ms. Palmer, seconded by Mr. Taylor, that this ordinance be placed on second and final reading at the next council meeting. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Okay. Moving on to new business, Mr. Corman.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, first I'd like to remind the council and the public that we're going to go actually 2 weeks in a row with no council meetings. August 26th, Monday, August 26th, the council meeting has been canceled. It's a council holiday. And then September 2nd, of course, is Labor Day. That's a city holiday, and there will be no council meeting that day either. So the next time we'll be convening as a city council will be September 9th. And we will hold a committee of the whole meeting that night, 6:00 p.m. in the 7th floor conferencing center. And the topic will be alley-loaded lot requirements. And that's all, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Taylor.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, the Community Services Committee will be meeting on September the 9th at 5 p.m. We've got 3 items on our agenda. The first one is decriminalizing alcohol consumption in parks. The appointment to the Parks Commission of Sojan Thompson, and also the Muni Arts Commission's master plan update, and that'll be a briefing. And that's all, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Taylor. Mr. Zwicker.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I don't have any meetings to call out, but I do have a referral I'd like to make to the administration. It's been brought to our attention that Google, among other things perhaps, confuses Riverside Drive and Nishiwaki Lane, because as many of us remember, Riverside Drive used to run all the way from basically the library to the mouth of Lake Washington, but was changed a few years back to Nishiwaki Lane beginning down by Boeing. If you bring up Google Maps, it says it's Nishiwaki Lane. We've heard some anecdotal comments that perhaps there is some difficulty for police and fire to get there. That being said, I'm not sure there's a lot that needs to go on, but I'm hoping that the administration can just double check with Valleycom, our officers, that type of thing, and see if those things are straightened away, and maybe a letter to Google. So with that, I refer the issue of Nishiwaki Lane name confusion to the administration.
Second?
Moved by Mr. Zwicker, seconded by Ms. Palmer, that the confusion over map regarding Riverside Drive and Nishiwaki Lane be referred to the administration. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it.
That's all, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Ms. Breyer.
Yes, on September 9th, Monday, September 9th, the Finance Committee will be meeting. We have 2 items, vouchers and emerging issues and revenue streams. And I'd like to propose that since the Utilities Committee meeting is canceled at 5:30, that we could take 5 o'clock and then Community Services could take 5:30.
Greg's already called out 5.
Oh.
Oh, no, that's...
No?
That's...
Does that work for you, Greg?
Absolutely, sure, happy
Okay.
to
Okay.
accommodate you.
All right, so I'm going
Finance is
to,
at 5.
yeah, so I'm going to announce that we'll do 5 o'clock.
Okay, and then Community Services will go to 5:30.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Prince?
Since Councilmember Breyer already stole my thunder, I'll repeat it anyway. Utilities on the 9th is canceled.
Okay. Mr. Person?
No new business.
Right, and Ms. Palmer?
Yes, the Transportation Aviation Committee will meet this Thursday, which is August 22nd at 4 o'clock in the council conference room. 3 items are on the agenda. Emerging issues in transportation, including CSATC update. Oh, that's the aerospace.
Yeah, Aerospace Training Center.
The second is Landing Gear Works lease agreement. And the third is Boeing Lease Amendment 3, which is LAG 10-001. And then, Mr. Covington, you did a great job on that administrative report, but I'm just going to add, this Saturday is the Art and Antique Walk downtown Renton, from 12 to 4, if I remember right.
Sunday.
No, I think it's Saturday.
It's Saturday.
On the 24th, you're right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. So that's always a fun time to come downtown, see art and antiques. It looks like it's going to be another beautiful summer day.
Thank you, Ms. Palmer, for catching Mr. Covington's mistake.
And Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Mr. Covington.
I have one go back. I hope this doesn't cause too much strife, but I was thinking about the committee of the whole meeting I announced for September 9th, 6 o'clock p.m. I announced it for the 7th floor conferencing center. So the subject is alley-loaded lot requirements. I think I might suggest that we hold that here in the chambers I know there's been a lot of builder interest in that, and I just want to make
Okay.
sure we have a room large enough, so.
We can do that.
Okay, thank
All
you very much.
Thank you. Was there anybody who didn't get a chance to address the council? Any staff member?
We adjourn.
It's been moved by Mr. Person, seconded by Mr. Zwicker, that we adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned.